All right, I am going to run through a editing workflow that I use for editing real estate photos here in Lightroom. So I'm going to skip the step of bracketing, stacking the bracketed shots together. You can look up how to do that, but it's a very useful feature where I stack all the images, all 5 brackets that I take of each particular scene. So as you can see here, if I expand this, 1 of 5 images, take a dark, next one up, lighter, and then even lighter. So I take 5 different photos, different ranges of values, so that we can then blend them into one HDR image that we can use to edit. So we have a lot of information in the dark areas and the light areas to create a nice appealing final photo with a lot of detail and low noise, because that is what we are after. So those are the 5 bracketed shots, and I actually shoot these in JPEG. So each of these aren't even raw images; they are actually just JPEG images. But because I shoot 2 stops apart from each photo, there's a very large range, dynamic range when you stack them together. So here is the HDR compiled image. You can tell in Lightroom because the file extension is .dng. And the reason these are all dark is due to the order in which I shoot. So I have it set up on my camera that I actually shoot the darkest frame first, because I like to make sure that I'm getting the information in the brightest areas, typically through the windows. But I think I may change that. It's more standard to shoot the middle frame first, your quote, typical regular exposure, and then either go dark or light after that. I may change to that, but regardless, it doesn't matter. You guys don't care, so we're going to move on. So here's the actual compiled photo, and we can jump right into starting the edit. So the first thing that I do is just in general, just bring up that exposure until it's a nice kind of happy medium where everything pretty much looks like a nice medium exposure for the whole photo. I think somewhere around there looks good. As you can see, we can bring up that exposure a lot, and we are not getting, noise in the dark areas. And we're going to solve the highlights partially right now. So we'll actually jump down to highlights. We will lower those highlights pretty much all the way. As you can see, we can actually bring back a pretty good amount of detail, and we can bring back even more, which we will do later. The shadows, it's still looking pretty dark in the shadowed areas. So we're actually going to bring the shadows up a bit. The white point up just a little bit. I usually don't mess with this too much. As you can see up in the histogram, we're not clipping too many white pixels quite yet, so we're still good there. Black point, blacks, we're going to bring down a little bit so it's not so washed out after we brought up those shadows. That's looking okay for now. We're going to skip the clarity and texture panel for now. We're going to go to the tone curve. So we're still sticking with adjusting the light in the photo. And a tool that I like to use is the adjust point, like this button here. It's like a little tool where you can actually click inside of the photo and either drag up or down to change the values of that particular value that you chose. So as you can see on the right on the histogram, I'm actually adjusting kind of the midtones right now, and that's what I want. I kind of want to bring up the midtones a little bit. The walls still look a little dark. So I'll bring those up. And I'll actually go back over to the tone curve and then add a point and actually bring the highlights back down to where they were, because I don't want to blow those out, and then bring the darks actually back down to where they were as well. So it's kind of different than a typical S curve. I'm actually making it a little more, a little less contrast, but as you can see, this is the before and after just of the tone curve change. So I just like to brighten it up just a little bit more. The mixer, I bring down the yellows a little bit because you get a lot of cast on the walls and the ceiling, but we're going to actually take care of that mostly through a mask. Same with blues. I like to make sure there's just no blues or magentas kind of in the photo, so I just bring those down a bit. Typically don't adjust those too much. Some of the most important settings when editing a photo, real estate photo, remove chromatic aberration. It's the green and purple kind of fringing effects, typically on the sides of, I get it a lot on my lens that I use. I use the Canon 10 to 22. It's not a particularly, expensive or really nice lens, so I'll kind of get a lot. And then enable profile correction. So this corrects the barrel distortion, and then the vignetting in the corner. So as you can see here, we actually changed the photo quite a lot, and it looks a lot nicer, a lot cleaner and brighter. And then we'll see here, still getting some chromatic aberration here. So I'm going to go over to the manual mode here in the lens corrections, and I'm actually going to bring up the correction for the purple, and then bring up the correction for the green. Purple might need to come up even more, change the range a bit. Just expanding the range for which that correction takes place. You can see it still happens, but it's pretty good step in the right direction from what I started with. Can't remove all of it, but in the grand scheme of things, you really don't notice it that much. Transform panel. I will admit I'm pretty good at usually keeping my uprights upright in the camera, but if I did need to change them, typically I do on most photos, but this photo is looking pretty good, but I'll show you anyways. I like the actual, the upright tool here. I don't use any of the auto modes, so I'll actually use this tool and get as close to the outside of the photo as possible, straight edges that you can find that are closest to the edges. So like I'll use this wall, and then I'll use the frame of this window, and change it just a little bit. And then if it was a 1-point perspective photo, I'd also run 1 or 2 horizontal lines just to make sure things are nice and square. So that's about it for the transform changes in this photo. So that's the main grunt of the changes. Oh, and one more thing, I'll add a little bit more vibrance and saturation. The camera profile that I have set up on my Canon cameras, I like to shoot things kind of flat. That way I have kind of control in the editing process to add what colors I like, and I don't like there being a lot of auto contrast or auto colors added when I take the photos. So I'll add that in manually. I think that's looking a little bit better there. And then we'll add a little bit of clarity. Not too much. I don't like to go too crazy with the clarity. It's looking a little better there. And then I think we need to bring up the shadows just a little bit more. I tend to go on the side of, nice bright photos. I think they work a little bit better for real estate photography. And the temperature, I didn't change the temperature at all because I think the color temperature of the photo looks pretty much spot on. So from here, we're going to jump into masking. So we still have a few issues. One, this left side, a little bit brighter than the right side. And then 2, the windows are still a bit too bright for the scene, and there's still a lot of detail to be brought back there. And then the third step is just another mask that we're going to add to kind of just sharpen things up and make things look a little bit better by pointing your eyes in the right direction. So let's just jump into the masks. We're going to start off with a linear gradient mask. Go from the left to the right. We're going to end it about there. And then just bring the exposure down just a little bit. And then the highlights down just a little bit. I don't go too crazy with adjustments. We can bring the black point down a little bit as well. We'll see the before and after of those changes by clicking on the eye here. You can see the before and after, kind of just evens things out left to right. Not a huge change. The next thing we're going to do is actually get rid of a fourth mask that we're going to add. Is actually probably one of the more important ones. Is we're going to grab a brush. As you notice here, it's a nice soft brush, pretty big radius around it. And we're actually going to get rid of the color cast in the ceiling and on the walls. You can kind of see over on the left here, there's a pretty good amount of orange color cast. And then in the ceiling, there's some orange and green, and on the walls as well. So that's definitely something we want to minimize. Not get rid of, but just minimize. So I'm actually just going to start off. Typically, I kind of know how much I usually take off. So usually I end up around this point for the desaturation. And I'm just going to start by using the bigger size brush and just painting in the ceiling You can always fine tune after. So we'll hover over the mask, kind of see where that takes place. You can see in the left, I kind of missed some spots and down the stairwell. So we'll kind of hit this. Make sure, grab a big brush, just make sure we hit the whole ceiling over here. See where we're at, just a little bit more. And that's pretty much everything I want to hit. You know, it doesn't have to be super exact. Because the other point I want to make here is that I don't want to completely desaturate it. I still want to leave a little bit of that natural color and color cast in there. I think it looks a little bit better that way. So leave it about there, and then we'll do a little before and after. So this was before, and this was after. Before and after. We'll zoom in over here. Just do a little before and after. Kind of see that color difference. Okay, so that was our color cast mask. Then we're going to go in and actually bring up the windows a little bit as well. This is another thing too. I don't get super exact with this. I'm still using pretty soft brush, and it does not need to be exact. All right, as you can see here, it's like I said, it's pretty loose. I kind of go over the edges a little bit. It's not perfect. It doesn't need to be. And that's about that. So then with that mask selected, we'll bring down the exposure just a little bit, bring down the highlights, introduce a little bit more black into the areas. See a little before and after of what we've done. So as you can see, it's a pretty good difference, but I'm not gonna completely bring them all the way back in. Let's bring it down just a little more. And then we're also gonna make it a little more warm, because it is winter, so it's still a little more blue outside than the inside here. So I think that's about good. Then if I could, I could make one more mask, which I probably would for the final photos. I'd go back over these windows in the mirror and then bring them down just a tad as well. And then the final mask that I'll make is just a radial gradient here. We'll put this right in the center. This is kind of the focal point of this space. So we're actually just gonna raise the exposure a little bit of this area, get a little contrast in there, a little bit more on that, a little black point. We'll see the before and after of that effect. So yeah, it makes a nice kind of punch into the focal point of this actual photo of this area. So you can see all the masks off, and then all the mask effects that we've made so far. We'll bring it from that to this photo here. I think for the most part, we're pretty much done there. So we'll exit the mask. I think we could use just a little bit more saturation. Then you could fine tune kind of the light effects that you have in this photo. And something else that I like to do as well is to go to the reference photo, the reference mode in Lightroom. So I'll pick another shot that I took of that room. We'll throw this one up there, just so you can kind of compare, the overall exposures between the photos, your black points between them, your highlights, how much you brought the windows in each photo. Make sure the colors are matching. The floors in these ones, the colors do look slightly different. It's not a huge difference. That may be something I would actually slightly change a little bit. Maybe change the yellow in this one to a little bit more of the orange. That's what it actually looks like more in this photo. But overall, I think for the most part, these are looking like they belong in the same set. So that's something you definitely want to look at as well. So other than that, that's pretty much it for now. It's kind of my general workflow. And then after that, you do some sharpening, some detail work before actually uploading them online. And that is kind of how I go about editing my photos. If you have any questions, just let me know. And I may make another editing video in the future.